you will. I hope you'll love it. Okay, so friends, as I've mentioned already here today, we're talking about how to advance your career by focusing on high value work. And I'm realizing we've been talking all this time and I haven't even told you anything about me. So for those of you who don't already know, I'm Holly Burton. I'm a leadership coach who focuses on women in male dominated industries. So I've got the perfect audience in front of me, target market right here, obviously. But the reason I do the work that I do is because my background actually is in mining engineering. I worked a little bit in the weird unholy alliance that is mining tech space, sort of like a mining software company as well. So I have a foot in the software world, but predominantly my life was giant yellow haul trucks full of rocks for many, many years, which is incredibly male dominated. And what I found in that industry is it was very, very difficult to build a high flying, ambitious career, showing up as this package the way that I do. And as a result, now I work as a coach to help more women build their careers, move into leadership, lead effectively, and start to change some of these industries so that hopefully I one day work myself out of a job. Now, for anybody that's in this room going, "Oh my God, this talk isn't for me anymore. This is a hashtag lady brand talk." Don't worry. The good news is lots of things that work really well for women to build careers also work for men to build careers. So everybody in this room, I hope will get something great out of today's talk. I think most of us in this room probably want to move up. That's probably why you're here. It's right there in the title, right? And the great news is I have lots of conversations through my leadership coaching with leaders all the time about how these things go down. So the great thing is that your boss probably actually wants to help you, even if it doesn't feel like that all the time, even if you're not 100% convinced this person has, a little plan right up beside their desk of how they're going to, move you up through the org. Most of the time when I talk to bosses, they actually really do want to move their people up, and they're often incentivized around it as well, right? So the only thing that happens here is I talk to lots of these leaders and they say, well, listen, you know what? She's smart. She's ambitious. I really like her. I'd love to promote her, but she's just not ready. So who in this room has either been on the receiving end of this or has said this themselves? Gone, well, I like you. You're almost there, but just not quite. It's a pretty familiar story. I'm seeing some hands go up. I've had this conversation. Countless clients of mine have had this conversation. And it's really frustrating because this is maddeningly vague, right? Oh, just not ready. I'll get to work right on that, boss. Like, what am I supposed to do with that, right? And what I've learned over time is this "you're just not ready" thing is really kind of secret code for you suck at business. It's not the thing that most of us see coming, but it often is the case. And one thing that's really interesting about this from a gender perspective, which is a big part of my work, is that a lot of women are really given a lot of feedback around their communication, around the way they present themselves at work, but quite often are not given sort of these hard skills feedback. And so this piece often goes completely unsaid, and it's just like, oh, you're just not quite ready, but we don't really get down to the brass tacks of it all. So I want to give you a little bit of a client story. This is my lovely former client, Laura. It's obviously not her real name. And when I met Laura, she had been stuck at the manager level for a year and a half, and she was pretty done with it. She had been petitioning her boss to move up. She had been pitching all her best ideas and getting nothing but no's. She was finding herself near tears in every single meeting with her boss out of frustration just from how much she was trying to move up and how much she was trying to contribute. And she just sort of couldn't make it go. She just couldn't seem to crack up from manager into the director level. And she was working really hard at it. And, it was the same old story with her as it is with so many of us. Her boss just said, well, Laura, you're just not really ready yet. And Laura's pretty smart and she spent a lot of time thinking about this. And so she went, okay, I've got a theory. Is it my communication? Is it the way that I talk to you? Because again, she was like barely holding it together in some of these meetings. She did not feel confident after this string of rejections over a year and a half from her boss to every idea she ever had. Like, she didn't go in there like Wonder Woman, like, here I am, boss, here's my great idea. Can't wait to hear it. She was like, yeah, I think I have a real challenge around the way I communicate with him because nothing seems to land. So she asked, is it my communication? And he said, yeah, that's it. And so she left that conversation going, this is a confidence issue. I'm not confident enough. And if I can solve that, then I'll finally be able to move up, right? I've got to develop my quote unquote executive presence, right? But her boss, who I talked to, we did a 360 review around this. Her boss didn't think it was a confidence issue at all. He's like, no, she's plenty confident. That's not the thing. What it really is that she doesn't give me any good ideas. Like, I'm saying no to her ideas because they're not very helpful at the end of the day. And I don't think they merit her being at a director level or higher. And so an important lesson for Laura to learn here was that the confidence that she thought she needed was not really as important or even equivalent to the content of the message that she was delivering. And the challenge that she had was actually around content. And I see this time and time again with clients where they're just not quite focusing their work or the ideas that they're pitching in the right area to create the kind of yeses that they want. And then that creates the impression that they're not really ready for something more senior. And, the truth is for Laura that her content did kind of suck. Like the ideas that she was pitching to her boss were not that impactful. They were not that interesting. If I were him, I also would have said no. But we were able to fix that. Laura and I worked together over about 6 months. And by the end of it, she was a VP, which was amazing. So in the space of 6 months, Laura moved up not only to director level that she wanted to, but she got promoted 2 levels up to VP and got a 20% raise, which was amazing. And the thing I love about that story is not me sitting here bragging like, I made a client a VP or something like that, right? But the thing I love about this is that Laura had been stuck for so long, and it felt like this big insurmountable problem. But actually, with a couple of tweaks in how she understood her work and what her boss was really looking for, she was able to make the leap 2 levels up, and she was ready to do work 2 levels up just by making that change. So really exciting for her. Super proud of Laura. Great job, Laura. And let's see how she did it. Now, I've got a guide that I'll give you guys at the end. So we're going to go through a whole bunch. I've got like sort of 5 steps I'm going to take you through here. And I've got a downloadable guide that you guys can fill out with questions and prompts that'll help you do this. And I'll share that with you at the end. So anyone here who's like furiously taking notes, you can put your pencil down and just pay attention. Don't worry, you'll have full notes by the end of it. But let's talk a little bit about how Laura did this big transformation. So the problem, as I mentioned earlier, was that, when Laura told her boss about the work that she was doing, he didn't care. And then when she told her about the work that she wanted to do, like pitch new ideas to him, he cared even less, right? So we went, okay, how are we going to fix that? So the first step that I had Laura do and that I'd have all of you do coming out of this webinar today is to do what I call a business value Venn diagram. So imagine a Venn diagram, 2 intersecting circles. On the right-hand side, we've got the value that you provide to your company. So this is all your skills, your talent, the jobs that you do, the projects that you take on. This is kind of everything that you're bringing to the table here over on the right. Then on the left, you've got the things that the business actually needs. So this is anything that's going to help it do its kind of main corporate mission of making money or, pursuing a new valuation or, getting its next, big set of capital investment or what have you, right? So in the center of these 2 things, of the value that you bring to the table and the things that the business actually needs, is what I call high value work. So this is the place that I want you guys to be targeting here, which is at this sort of intersection of what you bring to the table and what the business actually needs. And this is where you're going to find the most accolades, the most promotions, and honestly, the best raises of your life is when you're doing work in this neighborhood. So where do we think Laura's work fit in to this Venn diagram? No surprise, entirely on the right-hand side, nothing even intersected at all with any business needs. So Laura, her job, she had an interesting role. She worked for a relatively small company, and she had a dual role between sort of finance and HR. And a lot of her work was really focused on that HR side. It was easier for her. It was a little more intuitive for her than the finance side. So on the finance side, she was sort of keeping the accounting ticking along. And then all of her sort of pitches and interest was in building stuff on the HR side, right? But the problem is she'd come in and say to her boss, like, hey, I've got a great idea. What if we do this sort of morale building project? And her boss would go, listen, I'm bleeding customers. I don't have time for your morale building projects. Like, bring me some money or go away, right? So a lot of the work that she was doing was kind of over here. Now, it's not to say that that work doesn't matter or has no value, but it wasn't well aligned to the needs that her boss saw. So she found herself basically with all her work sitting on this right-hand side. And I want y'all to spend some time doing this kind of assessment for yourself. The work that you're doing, where does it sit in this Venn diagram? Is it over on the right? Is it closer to the middle? Where is it actually sitting? So for Laura, from there, we had to go and figure out, okay, so if all my work's sitting over here on the right, what even are the business needs? Because I'm obviously not meeting them, right? So how do I figure out what the heck the business needs? It's not what I thought it was, so what is it? So for that, I introduced her to my very good friend, the Business Alien. And the Business Alien is a tool that I use to teach people about kind of what the main needs of businesses are. So let's imagine the Business Alien is fresh from outer space, here to study all of us on Earth. He's, interested in us kooky little humans, and he is cute, curious, and a total noob at this Earth thing. And as he looks around, he goes, God, you guys spend a lot of time on this business stuff. Like, 8+ hours a day, y'all are doing business. What the heck is it, right? Why are you doing so much business? And what even is? So to help the business alien out, we say, okay, business alien, at the end of the day, business kind of boils down to 3 basic things. Okay, number 1, making more money. Number 2, spending less money. And number 3, reducing the risk of us being able to make more money and spend less money, and that's it. If we're doing one of those 3 things, then we're probably doing business. If we're not, it's probably not business, right? So the business alien goes, okay, I think I can understand that. So this business alien guy, he's a really useful tool because you can take whatever job you're currently doing and try to explain it to the business alien. So let's say that your job is to produce an event like this, right? A little webinar with Holly for your customers, right? And you say to the business alien, hey, I'm producing this webinar. And he goes, great, why is that business? And you can say, well, because it's going to make my customers happy. And he goes, I don't get it. Why? How does that make your customers, how does making your customers happy make it about business, right? You can say, well, if our customers are happy and they're able to do their work better and be more effective, maybe they get promoted, let's say, then they might have more purchasing power and they might be able to buy our products, which would mean that we'd make money. And he goes, oh, it's a business thing. It's about making money. I get it, right? So part of the reason I'm showing you guys the business alien is to give you a framework for sort of thinking about your work and translating your work from sort of the day-to-day task-driven way we tend to think about our work and into sort of these key money and risk-driven ways that people at the top of the business tend to think about the work, right? So if you can explain your work in terms that the business alien will understand, 1, that'll have you like doing the work more effectively usually because you'll be targeting it at the right thing. But 2, it'll also help when you explain it to others, it makes sense to them from a business perspective. So
Well,
to create,
I
yeah,
just wanted to quickly jump in here. So I think one of the big challenges, especially in this industry, is that oftentimes the business looks at, the practitioner's value in a certain light and almost pigeonholes their value as you are creating case studies and fulfilling requests for customers and doing all of these things. So, I think probably everybody in this room has either felt like they've been in that position or currently are. So, and we may be getting to this, but just wanted to kind of throw that context out there that even though I think most of the folks here want to be doing those higher value activities, that can feel like a really big roadblock is that they're being tasked sometimes directly by the CEO to perform certain more, activities that feel very tactical.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, Kaylee, there's going to be a couple ways around that, and I'm happy to unpack this a little more in the Q&A section if we want to, right? But part of the work that y'all are going to do is that the people above you don't always have a perfect crystal ball. Sometimes they really do have a better handle on what the business needs than you. But there's a lot of CEOs out there who are doing busy work just like the rest of us. You know what I mean? And so having that conversation with the CEO and really translating, okay, so you want me to go and create a case study with a client. What are we trying to get out of this? How do we imagine this is going to affect revenue? What's this going to do for us? What's our key success metric? If you start to ask those questions, that'll start to have your boss start to think about it this way as well. And you can also create some proposals around, okay, well, what if we did this instead, right? So I'm not saying that that's going to be a flawless plan to pull them off of every request they're going to send you on. But when you start framing your work this way, internally and externally, it can help to direct the work into a more productive place as well. So to create value, especially that high value work, you want to tie your work to the business alien as clearly as you possibly can. Okay, so you've got this friendly little Venn diagram here between your value, the business needs, with the business alien looking on, making sure that you're finding yourself in the middle and not over on the right. So let's imagine that you've got a proposal, switching to cheaper pens, something incredibly silly, right? So switching to cheaper pens is something that I can explain to the business alien, right? It's really easy, saves money. There, we get it. But I don't know if that's going to be the business alien's favorite way for me to spend 40 hours a week, right? Imagine I was sort of trying to decide whether I should spend time switching to cheaper pens, or in Laura's case, paying less corporate tax, working on a project that would have me pay less corporate tax, right? Which of these two is going to be a better project for me to work on? Which one is the business alien going to be more excited about?
Taxes.
Corporate tax.
Taxes, no question, right? We love the taxes more than we love the pens. So there will be times when it's incredibly obvious what the business alien will like, but you don't want to just explain it to the business alien. You actually want to impress the business alien, have the business alien truly fall in love with it and find something that's as close as possible to the center of that diagram, not just sort of like right on the edge, right? So we're trying to really give him these heart-filled eyes, make him excited. And we want to find the most important business need that we can possibly be satisfying, right? And so in some cases, like we have here, it's really obvious, right? We can tell without doing any math or thinking about it for more than a few seconds, it's obviously going to be the corporate tax idea, not this pens concept. But every once in a while, you're going to come across something that's a little less clear cut. So imagine that Laura was sort of weighing between paying less corporate tax, working on a project that would help her pay less tax, or working on a project where she'd be changing the payment terms on all the contracts so that they got paid sooner, had a little more liquidity, maybe had to, use a little less debt for their day-to-day. Suddenly, this is a lot less clear cut. Which of these two projects she should prioritize and when, or even really how much the business alien would love both of these projects, right? Like how much is this worth? So a key tool that I want you to use as you're sort of thinking about which work should I be working on is I want you to go and actually quantify your work. This doesn't have to be perfect dollars and cents. It can be back of the envelope, sort of, rough scale. But I want you to get a sense of, okay, if I go ahead and do this project, how much money is in it? How much risk am I going to reduce? How much cost am I going to save? What does this actually look like, right? So this is going to help you prioritize your work, but it's also going to help you communicate about your work because quantifying it has a way of instantly clarifying what the value is. You take it from vague to specific with just a few numbers, right? So once you've got that, once you've gone ahead, identified where your work sits in the Venn diagram, prioritized it based on what's going to impress the business alien the most, and assigned some dollar figures to it if you can, then you've got to actually start doing it, right? You don't get to just like come to this thing, fill out the Venn diagram and go, yay, now I've done it. You actually have to implement this in your life and actually start doing the high value work. So for anything like all of my clients, you're going, Holly, how am I going to do that? I'm spending all day firefighting on Slack, doing case studies, doing things that my managers defined for me. Like, how am I ever going to make room for this? So I'm going to give you 3 pieces that you can do. And you probably, I'll warn you up front, will not like the first one. None of my clients like the first one, but I've given this homework many, many times to my clients. And that is cancel 50% of your meetings. And I know you're sitting there going like, 50%, Holly, like, are you nuts? I can't cancel just half my meetings. Like they pay me, I have to show up. This is insane. So I don't care if you actually cancel 50, but what I mean when I say cancel 50% of your meetings is I really want you to take a hard look at the work that you're doing, especially anything that sits on the right-hand side and go, what of this work can I talk my way out of? What of this work could we just not do and nobody would notice? Will somebody not read that case study? Can we use another case study instead? Is there another way to meet that need, right? So step 1, get as much off of your plate that isn't sitting in that high value work zone as you possibly can. Then, if you can't get stuff off your plate, delegate it to your team if you have one, or if you're an individual contributor, try to delegate kind of outside of your department where possible. So I see this quite often with leaders where they'll really be down in the weeds and they'll be doing a lot of the work directly with their team. And as a result, they don't have time to get up into that higher level strategy work. People often come by that pretty honestly, they go, the team's not ready, they haven't been trained, I've got to make sure it's right, I don't want things to go out with errors, right? But it's really important for you to build in those delegation muscles because otherwise you get stuck down there kind of working a level below where you're supposed to be, and then you never get to have time to do the high value work, right? So I want you to first get good at actually delegating, taking anything that doesn't really require your special touch or your special knowledge and getting your team to action on it. And then once you get good at that, I want you to go another level up. So from there, once your team is getting good at sort of being given a direct task and executing on it, I want you to start sort of delegating the plan to them. So by that, I mean, rather than sort of saying, hey, I want you to produce 5 case studies in these neighborhoods by this time in this format, I want you to instead go, okay, we need to find a better way to create a feeling amongst our client base that we can meet their needs. And the clients that we're trying to target are this, this, and this. Come up with a plan for me about how we're going to do that, make a strategy, propose it back to me. Then you can edit that strategy and then have them go out and execute it. So what you're doing there is building their ability to kind of work one level up, take over from you eventually, and making it so that you don't have to be as involved in the day-to-day. Okay, step number 3 is I want you to actually schedule in your calendar, physically with calendar blocks, your designated high-value work time. So what'll happen most often for folks who have done number 1 and 2 is they've now got all this space in their calendar. They're like, great, I can do my high-value work. And then it comes time to do it. And what happens, friends? Anyone been there? You go, email's looking quiet. Maybe I should look at Slack. Maybe I could, maybe I'll just go do a little bit of copy editing over here or fixing this and that up, right? Suddenly there's all kinds of little work that you'd rather be doing than the scary new strategic work that you've never done before that your boss is really excited about because you know there's a bunch of money attached to it. And so instead you want to go and hide in a hole and go back to doing the busy work, right? Or vice versa. If that doesn't happen, other people just fill your calendar with meetings. Oh, a bunch of free time, and then they put themselves in it, right? So it's really important that you actually block out some space in your calendar for this work to happen, because it often won't happen automatically, especially if it's you flexing a new muscle at working at a new level. So you've got to actually schedule it in. Okay, once you're there, hopefully you will have then been doing some high value work. Then you've got to go tell your boss about it. You can't just do it in secret. And you've got to tell your boss about it in language that they'll understand. So if you were Laura, you might say, hey boss, great news. I did the payment terms project and it added $200,000 this month. Amazing. And then the boss, dressed as the business alien, because spoiler alert, the boss has been the business alien all along, goes, oh my God, I love it. Promotion time for you. And part of the reason this conversation goes the way it does is because Laura was able to frame her work. One, she's pointed her work at the right spot, the middle of that Venn diagram, but she has also framed her work around something that her boss can understand. She's gone, here's how much money it's worth to you this month. And he's going, yeah, I like $200,000. I'll take it, right? So it's not just the work that you're doing, it's also communicating the work in terms that they'll understand, in terms that the business alien gets, basically, right? And that'll help you move up. So folks, 5 steps to doing higher value work are: number 1, take a look at the work you're doing now through the lens of that business value Venn diagram. See where it actually sits. If you don't already know what the business needs are, try to map those out using the business alien. And by the way, you know, that business alien that I told you guys about, those are sort of the 3 most basic needs of a business. Your business is going to have its own specific needs, right? Like, you know, in the mining industry, for example, one of the main things that the industry cares about is safety. We really don't like it when we accidentally kill people, right? And I would argue that that's a 4th business need in the mining industry. You know, it's technically part of risk, I guess, but it's such a headline that it basically deserves its own billing, right? If you were working, you know, for the New York Times this week, one of the things on the list would be like, kill OpenAI, right? Get them to stop plagiarizing from our journalists. That would be top billing at the New York Times, right? So there's that sort of basic guide through the business alien, but don't be afraid to sort of notice what people are talking about. Look at, you know, some of the shareholder reports and things like that. What do y'all talk about in your town halls? Like, what's really existential and important for the business is what we're talking about when we talk business needs, right? Then you want to identify what the most important ones are, so that you can work preferentially on those, and then actually make time in your calendar for it. Cancel stuff that you don't need to be working on, delegate stuff that your team can learn, and actually schedule in the high value work you want to do. And then don't forget to tell your boss about it. The number of people that I've seen who do steps 1 through 4 and then forget about number 5 and just hope their boss will read their mind and then promote them anyways, don't do it, right? We always have to make sure that they're aware of the great work we're doing. So make sure you say it, and say it in a way that the business alien can understand. And then, friends, you'll have set yourself up for promotion. And next week, we're going to talk all about how to have those conversations so it actually happens and doesn't just slip away into nothingness amongst the chaos of your boss's calendar. Okay, friends, there's our worksheet, which you can find at wimdy.com/slap5, and then the numbers 01. So it's a little printable sheet that you can fill out with a bunch of questions that will help you figure out that Venn diagram and where your work all sits in it, and how you can prioritize your schedule over the next little while to create some time for your high value work. So I hope you guys like it. And for anybody that wants to know a little bit more about this, I run a program called the Game Changing Year that helps people learn how to do everything we just talked about, and a little bit more. It'll help you learn how to create a coherent business case, how to influence other people who make decisions in your company, and even how to negotiate for pay and, you know, resources for your team. So if that's something you or somebody on your team might be interested in, you can find more info over at wimdy.com under the Game Changing Year, or chat with me. We're running enrollment for it right now. And otherwise, I'd love to hear from you. We're going to have some Q&A just now, but keen to hear from y'all as you go out and implement this. Does it work? Does it not work? Do you manage to prioritize your work? How does it all go? Let me know. I'm endlessly curious, just like the business alien, and would love to hear from you. So you can reach me at any of these places. Okay, friends, let's stop sharing the screen and take some questions. Okay, there may have been some questions in the chat. I should have mentioned up front that I didn't have access to the chat while I was presenting. So anything in there, Kaylee, that I should know about?
I just added one that I think would be helpful, which is, can you delve a little deeper around how to quantify your work and the different ways to do that? And maybe we could even walk through like a real example with somebody.
Yeah, that's a great question. So two things I'll say about that is, one, if you want a very detailed example with a ton of math up on the screen, over on the Wibdy YouTube channel, I have a whole hour-long talk on how to build business cases that'll be very related to this. So know that you can check that out. It's all about whether or not a mine should buy a new haul truck. So the math won't be applicable to your life, but you'll get the concept of how the math works, right? So that's thing number one, resource for later. And then, yeah, happy to do an example live. Does somebody have one that we can use? Give me some work. Let's try to quantify it.
I know you guys are working.
Yeah.
Or maybe
I can go.
Yeah.
Sure. Let's hear it, Lexus.
So I run global customer advisory boards for a tech company, and we struggle with not having business ops or marketing operations for my team. So I do a lot of aggregated data pulling manually, and it's very time intensive. And we kind of switch our priorities every other quarter. This matters. Then we move from being data driven to consumption driven, and we are always changing. So I find that when I get a system in place, then I have to kind of recreate the wheel all over again. So there's a lot of hamster wheel, for lack of a better term. So
Yeah.
just wondering, like with Salesforce, Tableau, or any other data systems, like tying those together, is that the most productive, or is just continuing to create my own business systems the best option?
Okay, that's a great question. Okay, so it's a great question, and I'm glad you're answering it. It's probably slightly different than what we're talking about here to some extent, but talk me through. So when you're pulling that data, what's the point of it? If you had to explain that to the business alien, why do we want that data?
I am the only voice of customer program throughout an entire organization. And the only way that our existing customer base is giving feedback on our existing roadmap and what we should plan for the future. So I'm always trying to do I need to do a field debrief where I go to our product or engineering organizations and say, this is a key problem I'm hearing from the top 20 customers in our Asia Pacific region or in EMEA, et cetera. And I have to figure out a way to really make that value resonate, as well as know what I need, even though I don't necessarily understand all of the technical components of our program.
So tell me if I'm getting this right. It sounds like you're almost doing sort of that product piece of understanding what it is the customer wants and how much they'd be willing to pay for it and how much it would cost internally to develop it.
Yep.
Do y'all have folks internally who do that other than you, or is it just you?
Just me.
Cool. Fun for you.
Yeah, it's always, every day is fun. It's creative.
Okay, so Lexus, we've got a couple questions in the air, right? One question is sort of how do I quantify these customer needs versus what it would cost us to actually build it? And then I heard earlier this question around, I can get the data through method 1 or method 2. Which one should I go for? Which one of those two do you want to focus on for now?
The first.
The first one of like, how do I actually quantify this?
Yeah.
Great. So do you actually ask your customers what they'd pay for that?
So we do what we call a Shark Tank, and we give them a set amount of money, and we say, if you had 3 products, where would you spend your most money?
Okay.
So I say,
so
okay,
that
do you
gives
want to
you
put all of your money in this bucket, or do you want to put it 2 in this and then none in the other?
Okay, so that gives you a sense of the relative worth of them, but not really the absolute worth. Do you have anything that quantifies absolute worth?
What they end up purchasing.
What they end up
So I go through the account team. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's I mean, that's interesting. And you could pull some data backwards looking and go, you know, our
Mhm.
customers all say they want to spend this, and in the end, they end up spending this. If that's relatively
Yeah.
consistent, you could probably use that going forward. I'd probably add some kind of question to the customer that goes, hey, if this was a product, what would it be worth to you? Like both quantitatively and qualitatively, and just start asking. I'm not saying that that's going to be the most reliable data. People are quite often unreliable reporters of that, but it'll give you another data point to kind of cross check. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
On the other side of things, from sort of the costing perspective, I think you're going to have to work with the devs around that. And, you know, I'll say this as a former mine planner, plans and estimates are just the thing you do to make God laugh at you, right? So
Yeah.
whatever the devs say, plus 50% or some ridiculous amount of fat in the budget, and kind of go from there. But I think that's probably not something you're going to be able to cost on your own.
Correct. Yeah.
Makes sense. So that's a really high level overview. Does that give you a path to get started?
Yeah, and I think it just comes down to like the process of our teams talking to each other, engineering, product, and marketing, and then really understanding the customer problem that we're trying to solve and making sure
Yeah.
we're meeting them where they are. And I think that we're just kind of drinking our own Kool-Aid a lot more than we're actually listening to customers. And so I think it's just kind of relaying feedback as much as I can and deciding where I can drive value.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think
Thank
like
you.
starting to ask, you know, those more pointed questions of the customers around like, really, what's this worth to you? And then I'd also get
Yeah.
curious around, well, is it actually worth that to you? Because I think what can happen quite often is it's like, you know, I remember this from when I was working at that mining software company, like every single customer wants every feature they're asking for because it's the most important feature to them, but it's probably fundamentally not a buy, don't buy decision a lot of the times. And it's probably way less often than you'd think really much of an enhancement or a detractor, you know what I mean? And I think
Mhm.
that that's kind of a key way that you can sort of add that business strategy, business alien lens to these conversations as well, is going like, you know, effectively like, do I believe them? What do I really think are the
Yeah.
odds that they actually do spend this money? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always competing priorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
One thing I'm curious about is in terms of because it sounds like what you described as really time consuming is like manually going into different systems and pulling out this data. And one of the exercises that I've done with Holly is around, you know, like trying to quantify the amount of hours spent doing some certain very manual activities. And then I would also be curious if you've done any like research or looked into you know, some technology that might be able to help that might have in the very short term might require a little bit of help from operations teams, but over time would save you however many hours so that you can be delivering back all of those additional customer insights that can be real revenue generators if you had more time to spend on it.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know if
that's
you've
great.
looked into
Yeah,
any
we've
solutions like
we've vetted a few vendors, but obviously budgets are tight. I think everyone in the tech industry can relate. Anything that I ask for, I have to really say this is what I'm going to do with it, and here's how other teams could use it because I'm a team of two. So
Yeah.
when we ask for something, they have to be like, okay, how much is the license worth versus just 2 people using it, or can we make it valuable for 10 people?
Lexus, another thing too, depending on the size of your company and sort of I call it like the planning maturity at the top. You know, I heard you mention earlier that there's some degree of whiplash quarterly,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
like the
Mm-hmm.
priorities are really changing. And so some of
Yep.
the work that might be helpful for you that sort of sits outside of what we talk about today, and in terms of bolstering your own reputation as somebody who's a little more strategic at work, but also in terms of making your life a little less hectic quarter to
Mm-hmm.
quarter, would be to actually have that conversation one level up where they go, okay, here are the priorities for this quarter. Like, okay, so what are we trying to achieve? Talk me through how come that's the priority for this quarter. I noticed it changed from last quarter, and really try to get at like, where are they going? You folks will probably find time and time again that if you get really good at thinking about a little more strategically at your level, you won't always find that the people above you are better at it than you. You know what I mean? Or
Mm-hmm.
have thought about it enough. Quite
Yeah.
often things are moving so fast that people are just making kind of gut calls, right? And so it might be helpful to sort of start managing up around not asking directly, but like, can we make this a little more stable? But that's effectively what you're doing, is really going, what are we after? Why are we trying to do this? Why does this matter and not that? And hopefully you can kind of get them to stick a bit better. I know things are volatile, and that's not always, the way the industry is right now. You don't always get to have a stable strategy. That's not always the reasonable thing to do, but you may be able to influence it a bit there.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah. Folks, anyone else have questions? No? Easy?
I really like the reframe though, right? Like I've fallen into the right side of the Venn diagram a lot. And I've had a lot, part of it too, is I've had a lot of customers say that they needed it. Had such a customer facing thing. And I think in the past, what I didn't do a great job is it making money, saving money, or reducing risk? And
Yeah.
I think being able to lead with that is a good reminder. And it's a good way, a good slight reframe that I knew. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. But it was a great way to be able to kind of state it in layman's terms a little bit. And I feel like I could even help in my future teams to be able to
Yeah.
state this. I'm like, we know we need this, but the business does. How do we translate it? Like, let's
Yeah, exactly.
I
Well, and it
think-
can be, go David, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead and then I'll come in.
I was just gonna say, I think it can also be, like I was just sort of talking about with Alexis, it can be a helpful, quote unquote, managing up tool with customers too, right? Like you can, because it'll help either clarify that there isn't really an important need there, or it'll help them get crystal clear on like, oh, this need really does matter and here's why, right? And so you can actually strengthen the need in the customer in some ways by connecting them to those business alien needs. They're like, oh yeah, I do need it, and it is worth this much money. And that can make, a sale easier. That can make the value more apparent in their eyes, stuff like that. And so, yeah, it can be useful kind of both ways, internally, but even externally facing. Some of those questions can be really helpful. David?
Part of
something you want to say?
the difficulty that I've seen working with multiple C-suites and multiple CMOs is really not clearly understanding customer marketing, because we are that customer interface that is not sales. We are oftentimes the only other person that connects to customers in multiple ways. And the vast majority of CMOs and executives that I've worked with, well, specifically CMOs, they are very interested in growth gen. That is it. They want to see leads. They want to see MQLs. They want to know how many leads you can bring in and how many dollars you're bringing in. Being able to tie a customer relationship to dollars can be very, very difficult in our world. Now, I think most of us have probably figured out ways to do it or to show influence. But, as a customer marketer, you really can't say, we brought this many leads in the door and we converted this many. Now, did we have influence on bringing those leads in? Did we have influence on converting them? Absolutely. But I think it's being able to monetize and place a dollar value on those that becomes the crux. Because when I do talk to CMOs who get it, who understand customer marketing, they find us, as valuable, if not more valuable than the growth marketers.
I think, David, one of the things that I see is it's like with sales is so obvious, the tie is so obvious. People go, oh, you had the conversation. It was clear how you did it, right? With marketing, it's like, well, did the blog post really get them there? It's hard to know. It feels less tied in, right? And I think part of what I think could be really helpful along these lines is not just like, yes, there's the focus on sort of quantifying it, but also the focus on strengthening the obviousness or the plausibility of the claim that you have to that customer. Does that make sense? So
It does.
Yeah, like really working on showing how and why that is a plausible influence. Does that make sense?
Yes, and in the past, I mean, with the work, say the work that Lexus is doing with cabs specifically, there are so many monetary type aspects that you can take out of that. The reason that they are cross-selling, that they are upselling, is because they came to the cab. The reason that we did not spend an additional $5 million going in the wrong direction is
Yeah.
because the customers threw tomatoes at our CTO basically and said, no, we don't want that. Why are you building that? And it's like, oh, okay, what do you want? Well, we want this. It's like, great. All right, we'll do that. Excellent. Sign me up. I'm going to buy it. So
Yeah.
I think there are definitely ways to do it, but it's getting that point across and having the opportunity to, to monetize as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
David, I like what you said, and I think there's two elements with that. One, customer marketing is still very young, and there's a lot of traditionalists out there with Mark. I ran into them. We just never saw eye to eye. They never saw my data. Like, they didn't think the data I brought made sense to them, because it was part of a brain that just doesn't work with a certain level of sales-driven marketing and that type of growth. Where
A
our growth
lead is a lead is a lead. Yep.
right,
That's
right.
it. And if
Where
it's not
our
a
growth
lead,
is, yeah, our growth is that super growth enabler, right? A company can't hit super growth if their customers are stagnant or dropping off. So I tell, like, we are the element of super growth. If your customers are growing at a rate of 105% a year through upsell, cross-sell, and not revenue loss, and you add your logo add-ons as you do, we are one half of the puzzle piece as we go through. And catch is, not everybody believes it. Not everybody believes in the customer. And I think there's a couple layers. One, we're still a new industry as customer marketing. So I'm finding I'm explaining until I'm blue in the face to VPs that no, we are not just story collectors. We are revenue protectors. This is how it happens through the stories. And we have to ask for permission to we got to earn the right to get the story. And to earn the right, we have to do these other things that will help with everything. I think another level too is we haven't done a really good job at hitting those three elements of the alien and what the alien wants. And a lot of it we don't, like Lexus. I totally understand. Shops just aren't built to give us the data we want and need. My heart hurt hearing the data scrounging you're doing, because I've had to do it. And it is difficult. It's difficult to get the resources. But once it hits, there's this huge aha moment. As soon as everything connects and you're able to see it, there's a huge aha moment.
Well,
and I think
it's all around the advocacy. Just like we want customers to tell other customers how great the product or the services or the solutions are that we're creating. When I can get a customer to talk to someone in the C-suite, they are the biggest promoter for customer marketing. Because I've had more customers than you believe say, we think your products are too expensive. We'd like your cost to be lower. We wish your quality was a little bit better. We wish you were designing what we want exactly, but we will never leave you. And I get more customers saying, we will never leave you because we have a relationship. And it makes those other three, it makes them matter, but not as much. But when I can get a senior level customer to tell someone that in our C-suite, I get funding for the next year or two. So that's the key. Just like we use advocates to sell our business, we need to use advocates in some way to sell ourselves and to sell what it is we're doing. All right, I'll jump off my soapbox now.
No, David, I think the silence after you stopped talking on the soapbox is because we agree with you, right? And we're all just noticing what Kaylee put, calling the baby ugly. It's a good way of calling the baby ugly. Yeah.
It's very difficult because like the C-suite is so close to the product and so close to the business, they tend to have a very biased perception of things. And so that's why it can be really hard to tell them difficult truths and they don't listen. But I mean, this is why I'm such a huge believer in customer interviews, because even just having like 10 people, if you ask a question like, what is it that we could be doing better? And you start to see all of these themes bubble up in every single response. And you can put those quotes in front of the CEO and say, hey, this isn't me saying it. This is what our customers are saying. I mean, sometimes that's the only way to.
Well, and Kaylee, you're right. And in the C-suite, the majority of people there, they love new logos. New logos are shiny. New logos are exciting. New logos are what they want to talk to Wall Street about. But you have to, and we have to get them to realize that by working with core customers, by working with current customers, by strengthening those relationships, if we can get a customer for life, that's worth so much more than chasing a new logo. And it's that type of messaging. When that gets across, you're right. They absolutely get that aha moment of, oh my God, yes, of course we can take 3% of what we're spending on sales and new logos and put it into customer marketing, put it into voice of customer, put it into cabs, whatever that may be. But it's getting them to click, getting them to understand that. And it's a challenge, but it's doable.
I think it's really interesting the thing you just said there, David, right? Because I think like, you know, you were talking about they want to be able to go sell that logo to Wall Street, right? Basically. And so that's a really good example of, you know, I was talking about how these are the main sort of business needs, but the business alien has other ones. That's a really common one is like, give me something good I can tell my board, give me something good I can tell my shareholders, right? And so if that's what they have now, you've got to give them a better story to tell, right? However you're going to tell this story, it's got to be worth more to them and it's got to sound better when it gets into the, you know, the ears of Wall Street or whoever it is that they're telling the story to. That's the challenge for you in framing your work.
If you
is
can
how do I
tell
make this a
someone,
better
if you can
story?
tell Wall Street that your churn is 0, people will throw money at you.
Uh-huh. Well, I think the churn of 0 is the bigger challenge, David.
Of course. No, of course. But it's all about building those relationships. If you can minimize that, if you get your bigger customers on board for life, if you don't lose customers, that's what it's about.
But it's probably also about contextualizing the value of that change versus the new shiny logo.
Right.
If you ask me, what do I think is more valuable, a new logo or a slightly less churn? Gut feel, I'll go new logo, most likely. So
Right.
you probably have to counter
That's
that
the
narrative.
misnomer. That's the misnomer. You know, 6 times more expensive to get a new logo.
Yeah, so fix it with data. You can fix that
Right.
with data. Yeah.
Yes, you can. Yes, you can.
Okay, friends, I know we're coming up to the end here. If y'all have any last questions, you know how to get a hold of me, holly@hollyburton.ca. You can also find me anywhere on the internet, you know, Google me, ChatGPT me, whatever the kids are doing these days, you can find me. Kaylee, any particular sign off you want to do here?
Just that on Thursday, we have a webinar with Cash Walker where he's going to be talking about actually, especially Lexus, I think your data challenges will be interesting because he's going to be talking about how they pulled in data from a lot of different systems to feed into Slap 5 and the integration between Slap 5 and user evidence. And I'm only saying this because I know Lexus is a current customer. So, but yeah, I can send out the link to that to all of you as well. It's this Thursday at 11 Eastern, I believe. So I'll make sure to share that. And yeah, other than that, thank you guys for joining, and we're looking forward to the next session that'll build off of this one. And feel free, if you have anybody in your network that's looking for a job, you know, feel free to share the link to registration with them as well, because I know that session will be really valuable too.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank
This was great.
you.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
great
Great
day.
time.
Awesome. Have an excellent day, everybody.
Bye.
Guys.